Okay, let's go ahead and start, everyone. So we'll start like usual with a little, just a very brief, a minute of meditation and generate a positive motivation. So remember, this morning during His Holiness talk, he led us in meditating on bodhicitta towards the end of the first 40 minutes or so, towards the end of His Holiness, the first part of his talk. So try to remember as much as you can some of the things His Holiness said about the benefits of compassion, the faults of selfish, self-centered mind, the selfish mind, and the benefits of caring about others, and how beneficial is the aspiration to to think in one's own mind, to think I'm striving to achieve full enlightenment in order to work for the welfare of other sentient beings, of all sentient beings, right? So try to remember some of those things you heard His Holiness say this morning, and then formulate your own motivation for this session, for this review session. Okay, so take a minute, try to focus your attention, and then generate a positive motivation. Okay, so let's begin the actual part of the session. Yeah, so His Holiness kept his own comments quite short today. I think His Holiness only spoke for about, 30 minutes or so, maybe less even, and then opened the floor up to questions. And then before long, the audience ran out of questions, and then they did some long life prayers for His Holiness, and gave an account of the income and expenses of the group, and so forth. And then the session ended a little early. But when His Holiness was talking, he went through some very dense material. The main thing being these 4 absurd consequences that establish, that help establish that all things are empty of inherent existence. So I want to focus today on those 4 consequences, because His Holiness has repeated those a lot lately in the last, two teaching sessions, in August and September. I think His Holiness mentioned those both And yeah, I have to admit, I studied those. You know, we studied the middle way view for 4 years here in the monastery. So I studied those before, but I didn't think they were that important at the time. And maybe I didn't remember them so clearly. So even when I've heard His Holiness mention, I haven't sort of very clearly ascertained what he's talking about. So I made a little extra effort today to try to get more clear about what those 4 are and in which verses they're explained by Chandrakirti, because His Holiness quoted all 4 verses. So I've made a little document I'll show, which is on the Google Drive, and I'll share with you on my screen in a bit. So that's the main thing I want to focus on. But I think, you know, we can kind of divide up His Holiness talk into, again, about 4 sections today. So the first part, His Holiness spoke about the benefits of compassion, the importance of compassion in practice. And he quoted Chandrakirti's praise of compassion at the beginning of Chandrakirti's text, the entering the middle way. There's a verse in praise of compassion, which we'll go through a little later. So someone first spoke about the importance of compassion and the importance of combining that with meditation on emptiness, right? So to combine meditation on compassion and meditation on emptiness and how those support one another. Just briefly spoke about. And then His Holiness spoke about, yeah, this is what I'm talking about, these 4 absurd consequences. And how those are kind of the essential meaning of this text, the essence of eloquence, and also very important things that are taught in the entering the middle way. This other text by Chandrakirti, which, you know, this teaching was advertised as being about, right? So we'll go through those in quite some detail. And then after that, what did His Holiness speak about? Well, His Holiness basically emphasized combining again, you know, bodhicitta and emptiness. Let's see, kind of doing. Let me just glance at my notes here and see. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, so then His Holiness led us in a little meditation on bodhicitta. Right. That was the last thing His Holiness did. And then His Holiness took about 6 questions. And then he gave some closing advice at the very end of the session. Right. So I'll try to go through, I mean, I'll leave out the questions, but I'll try to go through the other main things that His Holiness taught. So let's begin. Right. So the first about compassion. Oh yeah. Main thing is His Holiness said emptiness alone, you know, meditation on emptiness alone, it can, you know, through that we can abandon the afflictive obscurations, but we cannot abandon the knowledge obscurations, right? So there's basically, you know, in order to become fully enlightened, we have to abandon everything that obscures our mind. Why? Because you could say the foremost quality of a fully enlightened being is that they're omniscient, that they have an all-knowing mind, which means they know all phenomena directly without any obstruction whatsoever. So anything that's possible to know, they can know that, right? So that means their mind is completely purified of any taints, of any hindrances to knowing, right? Any obscurations to knowing. So yeah. So to become enlightened, we have to completely purify our mind of any obscurations. So those obscurations, things that obscure our knowing, and things that cause us to suffer, are called objects of abandonment, right? Because they're things that, as we practice on the path, we have to abandon, we have to get rid of. So there's 2 main kinds of objects of abandonment. They're called afflictive obscurations. So those are primarily the afflictive emotions, like attachment, anger, jealousy, arrogant pride, grasping at inherent existence, ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, and so forth. So those afflictive so there's those disturbing states of mind, those distorted states of mind, afflictive obscurations on the one hand, and then there's also very subtle imprints of those. So every time, for example, we get angry, obviously the anger, it disturbs the peace of our mind, right? But every time we get angry, we also place an imprint on our mind, which is like a potential that makes us more prone to become angry in the future, right? So every time we get angry and we don't apply antidotes, we don't try to practice patience in spite of getting angry. So every time we get angry and we follow the thought of anger, we put a seed in our mind stream, which makes it more likely for us to get angry again in the future, right? So that seed, when it meets with its condition, we get angry again because we have the seeds of anger in our mind stream. So that's the anger, the afflictive emotion, and the seed of that afflictive emotion. So those are both afflictive obscurations. Those are both afflictive obscurations. So to achieve the state of nirvana or the state of arhat, we have to abandon those. But even if we abandon all the afflictive obscurations, we don't necessarily become fully enlightened, right? Why? Because also every time we get angry or we have greed or jealousy arise, not only it places a seed in our continuum to generate that afflictive emotion again, but it's like by the force of that afflictive emotion arising, it's sort of like a more subtle kind of imprint in the mind that just obscures our mind from being able to know things, right? So it's a very subtle kind of imprint in the mind, which that imprint doesn't become anger again, but it merely obscures the mind from being able to know, because anger is a distorted state of mind, so it places an imprint of kind of distortion. So that more subtle level of obscuration is called an afflictive obscuration. And to become fully enlightened, we also have to abandon that more subtle kind of obscuration. Sorry, I made a mistake. That more subtle level of obscuration is not called an afflictive obscuration. It's called a knowledge obscuration, right? So there's afflictive obscurations, which are more coarse, right? There are afflictive emotions and the seeds of afflictive emotions, which make us prone to give rise to those afflictive emotions again. Those are the afflictive obscurations. And then there's knowledge obscurations, which is a more subtle kind of obscuration, which merely obscures the ability of the mind to know. It clouds the clarity of the mind. So His Holiness was saying, in order to abandon either of those, we have to meditate on emptiness. Meditating on emptiness is the main way to purify our mind, right? To abandon any obscurations of the mind. But meditation on emptiness alone can only abandon the afflictive obscurations, the more coarse kind of obscurations. In order to abandon the more subtle obscurations, the knowledge obscurations, we have to combine meditation on emptiness with meditation on compassion, caring about other sentient beings, right? Wishing to free other sentient beings from suffering. And especially the aspiration to become fully enlightened in order to free all sentient beings from suffering without excluding any. So when we combine that very powerful aspirational attitude, the wish to free all sentient beings from suffering by myself alone, taking upon oneself that personal responsibility, we combine that very powerful aspiration with the wisdom realizing emptiness, then it becomes much more powerful, and thereby we're able to abandon even the obscurations to full enlightenment, which are called the knowledge obscurations. So then I'll share my screen now. So in that light, His Holiness quoted this verse by Chandrakirti. Yeah, this verse. As compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I will praise compassion at the start of all. So this is the second verse in Chandrakirti's his main work, the Entering the Middle Way, and he praises compassion, right? By saying compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. So he's making this analogy, whereas Buddhahood is like a harvest, in the autumn, like now, in the autumn, we harvest the crops. Buddhahood is like a crop that we reap from much effort. Just like if you're a farmer, you put a lot of effort into plowing the field, sowing the seeds, tending to the crop, and in the end, you reap your harvest, right? So he's saying compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. So it's the seed of full enlightenment, right? So by meditating on compassion, we create the very initial causes of our own eventual enlightenment, right? Because enlightenment primarily comes about through being concerned about others, wishing to benefit others. So it's like the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. Then it's also the water that nourishes it. So not only do we need to generate compassion, wishing to benefit all sentient beings at the very beginning of our practice, but all during our practice. Just like if you have a crop growing in a field, you have to water it regularly to nourish the crop, to keep it growing and keep it flourishing. So like that, all through the path, we have to meditate on compassion again and again and again in order to sustain our practice and inspire ourselves and remind ourselves of our motivation and give energy to our practice. So it's like the water that nourishes the crop, and it's the fruit that is along a source of enjoyment, right? So even after we become fully enlightened, we harvest the crop. Just like if you have a crop, you harvest the crop in the autumn, and then all through the winter time and the spring and the summer until you have your next crop, you enjoy the fruit of that, right? You enjoy consuming that crop. So here it's analogous to even after you become enlightened, what does a fully enlightened Buddha do? Do they just kind of relax in a lazy boy in their Buddha land and watch TV or something? No, they continually engage in activity, striving to free sentient beings from suffering in various ways, right? So why do they do that? They're compelled by great compassion, right? Compelled by compassion, wishing to benefit sentient beings. They never rest for a moment, but rather they continually work for the welfare of others. So that is also through this, that's like the fruit. And through that, through engaging in such activity that is beneficial to others, they themselves have great joy. Right? They're full of enjoyment, full of a sense of satisfaction and happiness and well-being. Why? Through the force of their compassion for sentient beings. Right? So thereby, compassion is also like the fruit that is for a long time is a source of enjoyment. Therefore, at the beginning, I praise compassion. So that's, and then His Holiness just added a few words that, compassion imbues us with great courage, so that whatever, in any situation we're facing, if we have compassion for ourselves, we have compassion for others, then we have a sense that there's something I can do. I can do something about this. And we have courage, thinking that whatever situation I deal with, as long as I approach, that situation with a mind of compassion, seeing that, other sentient beings are the same as me and experiencing suffering. We're all the same and wanting to be free from suffering, and thinking, what can I do to reduce and eliminate the suffering of others and the suffering of myself? Then, any situation, whether it's a pleasant one or a difficult one, it becomes something that we learn from, and something, on the basis of which we can increase our determination, right, to bring about more benefit in the world and reduce suffering in the world. So, and also then if we think, not only may I reduce the suffering of sentient beings, but for that purpose, may I become fully enlightened, then every action we engage in, as long as it's compelled by this aspiration to become fully enlightened, in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to sentient beings, then every action we engage in becomes a cause for our own enlightenment, and it becomes a cause for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. So it becomes, a source of immense merit, and thereby a source of immense well-being and happiness for ourselves and others in this life and future lives and from life to life. So then, by the force of compassion, from day to day, year to year, life to life, we go from happiness to greater happiness to greater happiness. Right? And we lead others along with us. So then, all the actions we engage in, they become part of our practice of the 6 perfections, right, as a bodhicitta, as a bodhisattva, the perfection of generosity, morality, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, then His Holiness mentioned, he cited this verse by Lama Tsongkapa in praise of dependent origination. Did I include it here? Yeah, I'll skip down. It's here. Speaking about the importance of using the reasoning of dependent origination in order to establish emptiness, the emptiness of inherent existence. So this is by Lama Tsongkapa. It says, "It is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme," right? There's 2 extremes, the extreme of nihilism on one hand, and the extreme of impermanence, which means inherent existence on the other hand, right? So it is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme, or you could say either extreme. That you've declared this excellently is the reason, O Savior. So Savior here is an epithet of the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, is the reason of your being an unexcelled speaker, right? So he's saying, why is the Buddha, he's addressing himself to the Buddha directly. The Buddha, why are you an unexcelled speaker? Why are you a great teacher, in short? Because you teach, dependent origination, and how through the reason of dependent origination, one abandons the 2 extremes of nihilism and impermanence. So remember, how does dependent origination abandon the extreme of nihilism? Because when we see that something is a dependently arising phenomena, we automatically recognize that it exists. There's no question about it existing or not. If something is a dependent origination, it exists. But also when we see that something is a dependently arisen phenomena in depth, we also see that the thing, although it exists, it does not exist by its own power alone. It does not exist from its own side, right? Things exist through the power of their causes and conditions, through relying on their parts, their constituent parts, and through the force of the idea of that thing, of the mind, the concepts and terms which impute, this on its collection of parts. So which impute I, the person, on the collection of my body and mind. Or, impute, I think I used my watch as an example yesterday, impute watch on this collection of, a watch band, a face, cogs and a buckle and gears and a battery and all the parts of a watch. None of those parts are the watch. The watch is not any of those parts. So what is the watch? It's something that's imputed on this collection of parts, right? So everything that exists has parts and is imputed on its collection of parts. And the same is true for any of the parts of the thing. Right? So the essence of the Buddha's speech is that he taught emptiness by way of dependent origination. So then we go to these 4 absurd consequences. So this is what I'm most excited to tell you all about today. Okay. So I'll show you this other document I created. So here it is. 4 absurd consequences of, I have a spelling error. Can I correct right in Zoom? Oh. Huh, it's not giving me any of the right choices. Okay, I missed the EM. Phenomena, okay. 4 absurd consequences of phenomena inherently existing, taught in supplement, actually it's entering the middle way, by Chandrakirti. You can translate it different ways, but below it's entering the middle way by Chandrakirti. So what this means is, if phenomena inherently exist, then there are 4 problems that come around, that arise. There are 4 absurd consequences, right? It means there's 4 logical consequences of things inherently existing which become problematic, right? So this is what His Holiness spoke about. I mean, it's difficult, right? These are not easy to understand. I know it's difficult, but this is what I do. And yeah, you don't hear these things this explained very often. So I thought it's good to at least plant some imprints in your mind with relation to it, and my mind as well. So the 4 absurd consequences are, so you have to think, if things inherently exist, then, right? So maybe just to clarify from the beginning a little bit, we have to imagine, what does it mean, right? I'm gonna show you me imagining, right? So what does it mean if things inherently exist, right? What does it mean if, why don't we take, since we're talking about ourselves as a person a lot, what does it mean if I inherently exist as a person? Again, right? We've already alluded to this yesterday and the day before, but let's just try to get it, bring it to mind again. What would it mean if I inherently exist? Remember, inherently existent is synonymous with something existing from its own side. So it would mean I exist from my own side, which is synonymous with existing by my own power, right? Or by the force of my own characteristics. So these phrases are all synonymous. But what does that really mean? It would mean that, I exist, if I inherently exist, it means we would exist in such a way, right? Or if we inherently exist, it means we exist in such a way that my existence basically arises through the force of my own entity alone, without relying on or without being dependent upon anything which is not me, right? So everything in the world can be divided up, in relation to any one of us or any object. Everything in the world, everything that exists can be divided into what is me and what is not me, right? You can take any object, like take my watch. Everything in the world either is this watch or is not this watch. Now, most things in the world are what? Are this watch or not this watch? Most things in the world are not the watch, right? The only thing in the world that is this watch, right? So with any object, you can take my mouse, it's the same way. Everything in the world is this mouse or not this mouse. So with regard to any one of us as a person, so when we meditate on ourselves as a person, everything in the world is me or is not me, right? So what is my hand or your hand? Is your hand you? No, nobody's nodding their head, right? No. Your hand is not you. Your body is not you, right? Yeah, Prajna's nodding her head the best. She gets the best head nodder award for this session. So, so what about your mind? Try to remember something, right? Just generate some memory consciousness. Remember something that happened today or yesterday or before. So that mind, your mind, which is remembering something, is that you? No, that's not. Why? Because you are remembering, right? Why are you remembering? Because your mind is remembering. But, but is that mind that's remembering, is it your mind? Yes. In order to have a possessor, right? Like so this is my watch. So I'm the one that possesses the watch, right? Does it make any sense to say, I am mine? Like I possess me? Not really, no. I mean, is this watch's watch? No, to be the owner of this watch, you have to be something other than the watch, right? To be the owner of my body, I have to be something other than my body. To be the owner, to be the person that possesses a memory, right? I have memories, right? So to be the person that has the memories, I can't be the memories themselves. I can't be the mind doing the remembering. I have to be something other than that. Right? So, okay. So back to what does it mean if we inherently exist? It means that as a person, we exist by the power of the person themselves, without relying on anything which is not me, right? So remember, everything in the world either is, so think about, I'm saying me, but I don't mean me, Tenzin Legtsok. I mean, think like this with regard to yourself, right? So everything in the world either is me or not me, right? So my body is not me, my mind is not me. Of course, the table, the chair, the phone, the air, the water, all those things are not me, right? Even the cells of my body, they're not me. I'm the person that possesses those cells. All the aspects, my feelings, my thoughts, my memories, my plans for the future, my emotions, all those are not me. They're things that they're parts of me, right? So, but what it means if I inherently exist, it means I exist by the force of myself alone, without relying on anything that's not me, right? So it means that I exist in such a way that I do not depend upon my body. My existence does not depend upon my mind. My existence does not depend upon any part of my body and mind. My existence does not depend upon air or water or food or other people, right? Or thoughts, right? My existence is, it's from the side of myself alone, without relying upon anything else, right? And my existence does not depend upon my concept of I. My existence does not depend upon my concepts about me, right? Because my concepts about me are something other than me, again, right? So in short, if we inherently exist, we exist in such a way that we do not interact with. And because as soon as we interact with anything, we're changed through that interaction. As soon as we meet anyone, we're a different person as a result of having met. As soon as we perceive anything with any of our consciousness, as soon as we have a thought about something, we change as a result of that experience. Every moment we're changing because every moment we're interacting with other things. If we inherently exist, actually, we cannot interact with anything, right? Because as soon as we interact with something, we have changed independence upon that through the power of our contact, our experience of that thing that is other than us. We've changed, right? So if we inherently exist, it means we do not depend upon anything else in any way, which means also we cannot have any contact, any relationship with. We cannot be changed by other things, and also we cannot act on other things. We cannot act to change other things, right? Because as soon as we act to change, as soon as we speak and someone hears our voice, then we've changed from becoming the person who was not heard to the person who was heard, right? We change independence upon being affected by other things and independence upon affecting other things that are other than us, right? So if we inherently exist, our existence is something that abides in isolation from anything else. It cannot be affected by, and it cannot affect anything else. That's a logical consequence of it. So the reason I'm stating this is to try to help you build up, your idea. When we're studying about emptiness, the most important thing is to recognize what we're talking about. Empty of what, right? Not empty of existence, not empty of people, not empty of tables, not empty of computers, not empty of ideas, not empty of, thoughts and aspirations, not that. Empty of inherently existent things. Empty of things existing from their own side, by their own power, independently, right? So it's important to look at, we're talking about empty of what, right? So that's why it's important to try to build up an idea of, okay, this thing we're saying does not exist. If it did exist, what would that mean? right? What would that be like? So if we existed inherently, that would mean that we exist exclusively by our own power alone, by merely what is truly I, what is me, right? Not depending upon our body, not depending on our relationships with other people and other phenomena, other objects in the world. Our existence would not have anything to do with those. We could exist totally separately. So again, another outcome, to help you build up this idea is that if we existed inherently, then you could, remember I said all phenomena that exist in the world can be divided into two. Me, what is me and what is not me, right? Or what is this watch and what is not this watch? You take anything that exists and you can divide everything in the world into two categories with a relation to that. What is that particular phenomena and what is not that phenomena? So, okay. So, so if we exist inherently, then we could imagine, take everything that is not me and put it on one side of the earth, right? And then you put yourself, what is me, on the other side of the earth, and you should be able to find something. So imagine you divide up into two groups. Everything that is not me, you push off to one side. And on the other side, you look for what really is me, the inherently existent me. So if we inherently exist, it should be like that we can push everything that is not me, my body, my mind, my ideas, my friends, my possessions. We push all of that stuff off to one side. And then on the other side of the room, or the other side of the universe, I don't know, whatever, we should be able to find something that is the real inherently existing me, whose existence does not depend upon anything else, right? Bane, what's happening in your house? You have ghosts or something? The lights flashing on and off, right? So it should be like that. An inherently existent person would be like that. If we really don't, if our existence really doesn't depend upon anything else, just like, like this, like a good example is like this. So here I have my two helpers, my watch and my mouse, right? So does the existence of this watch depend upon this mouse? No, I can take the mouse away and I still have the watch, right? Does the existence of the watch depend upon the mouse? No, I can put the watch over there and I have the mouse here, right? So if our existence as a person did not depend upon anything else, then it's just like, our body and our mind would be like the mouse and we would be like the watch. You could separate the two and they can exist independently of each other, right? In fact, you can think that let's say like you are the watch, or I am the watch. The person, me, is the watch, and the mouse is everything else in the world that is not I, right? So imagine the mouse we put on one side, everything else in the world that is not me, put on one side, and me put on the other side, and you should be able to find something. But in reality, it doesn't work like that, right? If I separate out my body, my mind, my thoughts, my feelings, my possessions, everything, and I look for something that is, the real me existing from its own side, I can't find anything. You try, right? You try. Well, maybe, yeah, anyway, we're going to meditate on bodhicitta later, so we won't try, but that's the kind of the essence of meditation on emptiness. But anyway, I'm using up all my time to look at these four absurd consequences. So let's go there now. Okay, so let's just read through the four first. The absurd consequence that an Arya's meditative absorption would be the cause for destroying things. I'll just name them first. And then I'll explain them. So that's the first. The absurd consequence that an Arya's meditative absorption would become the cause for destroying things. The absurd consequence that conventional truths would be able to withstand analysis. And then third, the absurd consequence that ultimate production would not be refuted. And four, The absurd third, the absurd consequence that ultimate production would not be refuted. And four, the absurd consequence that it would not be acceptable to state that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So these are the four. His Holiness named them at first, and then he went through them one by one, together with these verses from Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way. So the first, the absurd consequence that an Arya's meditative absorption would be the cause for destroying things. So I'll just read Chandrakirti's verse first and then explain. If the intrinsic characteristic of things, so this is Chandrakirti speaking from Entering the Middle Way. If the intrinsic characteristics of things were to arise dependently, things would come to be destroyed by denying it. Emptiness would then be a cause for the destruction of things. But this is illogical. So no real entities exist. Okay, so what does it mean? If the intrinsic characteristic of things were to arise dependently. So basically it's saying, okay, everything, they agree, everything that exists is a dependent arising, right? But if dependently arising things were inherently existent, right? So here, intrinsically existent is a synonym for inherently existent, right? So if things were inherently existent, then they would come to be destroyed by denying it, right? So what is it, denying it here? What does the it refer to? So I'll highlight the it. Come on, it. What does it refer to? It refers to intrinsic characteristic of things, right? So things would come to be destroyed by denying the intrinsic characteristic of things. And thereby emptiness would become a cause for the destruction of things. So what does this mean? It means this. So an Arya being means someone who directly realizes emptiness, right? So imagine you first generate a correct conceptual understanding of emptiness. So you conceptually realize emptiness, and then you meditate on it again and again and again. And then you directly realize emptiness. At that point, you become what's called an Arya being, right? So when an Arya being, they meditate on emptiness. So, and remember, emptiness is assumed to be the ultimate reality of things, ultimate truth of things. So when they're meditating on emptiness and directly realize emptiness, that mind is called a meditative absorption, right? It's a mind that's single-pointedly focused on emptiness. It's totally absorbed in the realization of emptiness without wavering whatsoever. So in the face of that Arya being's mind, nothing appears except the mere absence of inherent existence. Right? So this Arya being, they analyze. So how do they get to this point where all that appears to their mind is the mere absence of inherent existence? Because they analyze to see, does anything inherently exist? Just like I was speaking about, so they analyze, like, as a person, say, it appears like there's an inherently existent I, like I exist from my own side, or by the power of my own entity. Right? That's how we naturally appear, right? That's how we innately appear to exist. So do I exist in that way? And then they do the kind of analysis we're just talking about. Well, if I exist in that way, then when I search for this inherently existent I, or this I that's existing from its own side, when I search for that kind of I should be able to find something, right? So can I find it in the body? No. Can I find it anywhere in the mind? No. Can I find it separate from my body and mind? Like when I put the two off, put my body and mind off to one side, can I find it somewhere else? No. Therefore, the inherently existent person does not exist, right? So then they abide in that realization. The lack of existence of an inherently existent person, when they're analyzing the person, And then they also analyze every other phenomenon, and they do the same analysis and come to the same conclusion that, you know, those phenomena do not inherently exist. They're empty of existing from their own side. So then they meditate on that. So and then they do, you know, the direct generated, what's it called? A direct perceiver, realizing that. So in the mind of that meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, all that appears is the absence of inherent existence. And that's the ultimate nature of things. And that, you know, at that time, they're realizing truth. They're realizing something that's true. It's not like they just made up an idea and just focused on that. It's like they're analyzing to see what is the real nature of things and finding that. So how does our absurd consequence come about? If things inherently exist, then when an Arya being is directly realizing emptiness, not only are they seeing that things do not have any inherent existence, but they're realizing the truth that nothing exists at all, right? Because what is negated in the face of that Arya being's mind is inherent existence. So if all things inherently exist, then when they find that there is no inherent existence, it also becomes the case that they find that nothing exists, right? So thereby it becomes that, you know, basically, I mean, there's this way of saying it here. I mean, if my understanding is correct, I'm not 100% that my understanding is correct, but I'm offering you the best that I have, right? So I think it's correct. So if it's the case that, you know, because we have to assume what this Arya being realizes is the truth. So if they realize that there is no inherent existence, but all things, you know, inherently exist, then what they're realizing is that, you know, nothing exists. So thereby that, let me word it in the same way that Chandrakirti does here. So thereby things would come to be destroyed by denying, right? So if the intrinsic characteristic of things were to arise dependently, right, things would come to be destroyed by denying. So by denying that intrinsic characteristic of things, thereby emptiness would be the cause for the destruction of things, right? So the realization of emptiness would be the cause for the destruction of things, would be basically the cause for the realization that things do not exist. But this is illogical, so no real entities exist. Anyway, like I said at the outset, these assertions are quite difficult to get your head around. So that's why I'm saying, honestly, like, I'm not sure I have a correct understanding of it. But yeah, in preparing for this session, I didn't get a chance to read, you know, thoroughly through the commentaries on this verse again. But I did listen to what is His Holiness explanation again. And yeah, this is kind of the takeaway. So anyway, that's that one. Anyway, I'm introducing you more to these, not with the expectation that you just understand what this means, or even I do, just in this session, but that because His Holiness emphasized that this is, he said, you know, in terms of His Holiness' own practice, this is one of the main ways he meditates on emptiness. Remember, His Holiness said every morning he goes for a walk around the compound there where he lives, and he reflects upon these 4 reasonings to establish emptiness with these verses by Chandrakirti. So, and he encouraged us to do the same, right? So if we don't start someplace, we're never going to do it, right? So then the second absurd consequence. The absurd consequence that conventional truths would be able to withstand analysis. So this one's a little easier, right? So conventional truths means everything other than emptiness. And here, withstand analysis, so this is a common term in the consequentialist school. What it means is, you know, when we're analyzing to see if things inherently exist, if things can withstand that analysis, it means we should find something that inherently exists, right? So in this example I was giving, where, you know, we have a sense that we exist from our own side by the power of ourself alone as a person, without depending upon anything else. So then we analyze to see if that's really the case, right? If that really is the case, we should find something that does exist in that way. That's what it means to withstand that analysis. when I analyze to see if, I as a person exist from my own side, then if I really do exist from my own side, I should be able to find something that exists in that way, right? So that exists without depending upon parts, my body and mind or other parts, without depending upon causes and conditions, without depending, existing in relation to anything else that's not me, without depending upon my concepts of I, right? I should be able to find something. So when we search, we can see we can't find anything. So that means, nothing can withstand that analysis. So if I inherently existed, then something could withstand analysis. So let's look at Chandrakirti, what Chandrakirti says. Thus, when such phenomena are analyzed, nothing is found as their nature apart from suchness. So the conventional truth of the everyday world should not be subjected to thorough analysis. So His Holiness quotes this verse again and again and again. He's saying, the ordinary world that we see around us, we cannot, we have the ordinary things like the ordinary I that exists, my body, my mind, the table, the watch, the mouse, audio, Zoom, I don't know, everything that exists. We posit those things as conventional realities, which means we don't posit those things as existing from their own side. We posit those things as things which are merely imputed by the mind upon collections of parts, right? So I have the collection of parts of the watch. Upon that collection, I impute watch, thereby it exists. I have the collection of parts that are my constituents. Upon that, I exist. I label I, and thereby exist. Thereby I exist. I do not exist in, and nothing exists in any more fundamental way than that, right? But so when we analyze to see if things have a more substantial kind of existence, a more real existence, if they exist by their own power, through the force of their own characteristics, nothing withstands that. We cannot find anything that exists in a more concrete way than just imputed upon a collection of parts. So if things did exist in a more concrete way than that, then when we analyze to see if they do exist in that way, we should be able to find something that exists, without depending upon parts, without depending upon causes and conditions, without depending upon imputation and comparison and so forth. But we cannot. Right? So again, thus, when phenomena are analyzed to see if they exist from their own side, nothing is found as their nature apart from suchness. So apart from being empty of existing to their own side, nothing is found, right? So the conventional truth of the everyday world should not be subjected to thorough analysis, right? Yeah, I'm going. The third, the absurd consequence that ultimate production would not be refuted, right? In the context of suchness, certain reasoning disallows arising from self, from something other, or from something other. And that same reasoning disallows them on the conventional level too. So by what means then is your arising established? So this is actually a difficult verse because it's from the point of, this is actually an opponent speaking. This is not our own view. It's an opponent debating against Chandrakirti's view. So the opponent basically is saying, you're saying, you, Chandrakirti, and you consequentialists are saying, that everything is, empty of inherent existence. That's what suchness means here. Certain reasoning disallowing arising. So you're saying that nothing arises from an inherently existent self or inherently existent other. And that same reasoning, so this is, the opponent is saying, that same reasoning disallows phenomena being produced by causes other on the conventional level too. So how can anything be produced, right? How can there be causes and effects? So by what means is your arising established? So he's saying, if you say that nothing inherently exists, nothing exists by from its own side, how can you also assert that certain causes produce certain effects, right? that our actions, affect others? How can you, how can you say that the law of karma, the law of cause and effect exists, and so forth? So then Chandrakirti answers basically that, within, so the answer is coming below actually, but within, but let me just look at this absurd consequence first to make sure I'm on track. Oh, hold on. Oops. Okay. So as Chandrakirti is saying, within everything being empty of inherent existence, still, merely imputed causes produce merely imputed effects, right? Because everything is merely imputed by concepts, by the mind. So merely imputed causes, although they're merely imputed by the mind, they have no more substantial existence than that, but still they have the power to produce effects. Those effects are also merely imputed. So if you assert that things inherently exist, then it's impossible to refute ultimate production. Ultimate production means ultimately, or you could say ultimately existent is another synonym yet again for truly existent, or for existing from its own side, inherently existent. So if you say things inherently exist, then you cannot refute inherently existent production, right? But remember, inherently existent production, like inherently existent causes producing inherently existent effects, is an oxymoron, right? It's logically inconsistent, because inherently existent means things not depending upon other things. Effects being produced from causes means the opposite. It means effects depending upon those causes, right? So inherently existent means not depending upon anything. Causes, things being produced by effects, means that they depend upon their causes, right? So it's totally opposite. Yeah, I can feel you're probably getting tired by this point, but just be patient. This is the last verse we'll go through, and then I'll ask for your questions. So then there's this one. Hold on, I highlighted this because I wasn't sure I had the term right. I mean, I think I got it wrong. It's supposed to be this. Okay, so the fourth one is just the absurd consequence. The absurd consequence that it would not be acceptable to state that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So then Chandrakirti says, empty things depend upon, this is a great analogy. This is really helpful. Empty things dependent upon convergences. So here, convergences is a translation of a Tibetan word that it means like a collection as well. So what it means here by convergences is that, well, anyway, I'll read the verse first and then I'll explain. Empty things dependent upon convergences, such as reflections and so on, are not unknown. And just as from an empty thing, like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form. Likewise, although all things are empty, they do arise from emptiness in a robust way, right? So here he's explaining how things can be both empty of inherent existence and cause and effect can function, right? So to explain, it says empty things dependent upon convergences. So here convergences means like when a set of causes and conditions converge, they produce something like a reflection, right? So think about a reflection in a mirror, right? Think about your reflection in a mirror. What is going on? So first of all, a reflection in a mirror, it's kind of a false thing. When you see your reflection in the mirror, at first it looks like you're in the mirror, right? You see a reflection of your face, you might think at first, like when you're a little child or something, oh, that's my face, right? But then you reach out to touch it and your finger just hits the mirror, right? It doesn't touch your face. then you realize, oh, although it appears like my face, that reflection is not my face, right? So even though the reflection, it does not exist in the way it appears, still it has the power to produce an I consciousness that sees the reflection, right? It has the power to produce something, even though it's empty of existing in the way it appears, right? So just to repeat that, even though the reflection in the reflection of your face in the mirror, it appears like it is your face, right? But even though it appears like it is your face, it is not, right? Obviously. So even though it appears in a way that it does not actually exist, still it has the power to produce an I consciousness which sees the reflection, or a mind which experiences that reflection, right? And how does that reflection exist? It exists independent upon a set of causes and conditions come together, right? So what causes and conditions have to come together to produce the reflection? First of all, there has to be a mirror, right? Then there has to be your face in front of the mirror, or some object, in front of the mirror. And then there has to be light, right? So in Bain's room, we're not going to get any reflection, I don't think. So there has to be a set of causes and conditions: a mirror, right? Something in front of the mirror, and light, right? On the basis of that, so none of those things, the mirror is not the reflection, the object in front of the mirror is not the reflection, the light is not the reflection. So on the basis of this set of causes and conditions coming together, a reflection is produced, right? But that reflection, it's like a false appearance. It appears like it is the real face or the real whatever, but it's not. Even though it's a false appearance, it has the power to produce a consciousness. Likewise, right? Empty things dependent upon convergences, a collection of parts and causes and conditions, such as reflections and so on, are not unknown. So such things are known in the world. That's widely known. It's nothing special. In a similar way, and just as from empty things like a reflection. So what's a reflection empty of? It's empty of, like, say, a reflection of a face is empty of being the real face. Yet it has the power to produce a perception. Just as an empty thing like a reflection, just as from an empty thing like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form, right? So we generate an I consciousness that perceives the reflection, and it bears the form of the reflection. Likewise, although things are empty of inherent existence, they do arise from emptiness in a robust way. So that means, although we as a person, say, are empty of inherent existence, that doesn't mean we have no power to affect other things. Still, we have power to produce effects, to engage in actions, to affect other people, to affect our future, like to do things, right? So just because the way we exist is nothing more substantial than being something merely labeled upon my body and mind. That's how I exist. It seems almost like I don't exist, but yet existing in that way is enough that I can act, I can affect other things, I can produce effects in the world, right? So everything exists, although empty of inherent existence, yet things still, they do exist, and they can interact with each other and causes produce effects, right? So that's essentially what it's saying. So then, that's basically it for those 4 absurd consequences. And then just to, so that's where I stuck that in this little, thing here. That's where I stuck that in here, section on the 4 absurd consequences. So then there's this verse by Chandrakirti, again, emphasizing the importance of combining bodhicitta, or the method side of the path, with the wisdom side of the path, bodhicitta and emptiness. And then a verse, so these are verses His Holiness quoted, right? A verse on, I think I already went over that one. And then His Holiness, he led us in a short meditation on bodhicitta. So His Holiness quoted these verses, which His Holiness quotes again and again and again. So they're very important. So I'll just read through them, and then we'll end with that, right? Whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. And whatever suffering there is in the world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. It means myself alone, with a selfish mark. What need is there to say more? The childish work for their own benefit alone, right? The Buddhas work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. If I do not actually exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence, I shall have no joy. So then when His Holiness asked us to meditate on bodhicitta, he also used these two verses. They're the standard verses for generating bodhicitta. And then I think he followed with some dedication. I'm not sure exactly what the dedication was, but he quoted quite a few verses. All right, anyway, I'll stop there. I've been going on for way too long, so I hope you're not brain dead by now. If you have some questions, please ask away. I think there's already some question in the chat. Oh yeah, Roy asked at the very beginning, what would be the difference between aspiration and motivation? So, yeah, motivation is usually more, expressly at, when we're setting out to engage in an action, before we initiate a certain action, like, at the beginning of a meditation session, or, when we're going out for a walk or something. At that time, we check our motivation. What is our reason for engaging in that action, right? Whereas an aspiration is more like an attitude that we continually try to develop and enhance. I mean, and usually an aspiration is, a wish. We aspire to achieve some goal. There's a wish to achieve a long-term goal. So we generate the I don't know. I'm looking for another word, like another synonym, but I'm not finding one. But yeah, I don't know, a wish to achieve some long-term goal, and we have that wish. We try to habituate ourselves to that wish, such that we try to habituate ourselves to that wish, such that it arises continually, right? So that's kind of, we generate an aspiration. So I mean, they definitely have, there's cases when, in many cases, when our aspiration is our motivation for something. But a specific motivation is not necessarily an aspiration. They're very similar. It's a good question. And then Emilio has a question. I don't know. Can you expand more on the nature of compassion and on the ways to practice and cultivate compassion? With the practical examples, please. Yes, thank you. Very good question. So first of all, the nature of compassion. Well, usually, when you're studying Buddhism, yeah, maybe this is one way Buddhism is maybe a little different from other religions. In Buddhism, especially in the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, we really try to give clear definitions for most of the terms we're using and speaking about. So compassion, if you want to know more about the nature of compassion, it's important to learn the definition first, right? So yeah, anyway, so the definition of compassion is basically like this. A mind which observes the suffering of a sentient being and wishes for that sentient being to be free from suffering, right? So basically there's two parts, right? A mind which, well, three parts you can say. First of all, it's a mind, right? It's not a physical thing. And it's not a feeling, right? It's a kind of, well, it's one kind of consciousness, right? So it's a mind. And then it observes what? It observes a sentient being, right? So a sentient being just means a person, basically. who's not enlightened. Any person who's not a Buddha is a sentient being. Right? So that sentient being can be ourself. So the definition includes compassion for ourself. And it can be another person, a person other than ourselves, another human being, another animal, another a ghost, whatever, any other kind of sentient being, a hell being. So compassion is a mind. It observes a sentient being and specifically observes the suffering of a sentient being, right? So the pain, the discontent, there's all different kinds of suffering, right? There's the suffering, the suffering of change, pervasive compounding suffering, the suffering of, being alone, being lonely, the suffering of not getting what we want, the suffering of being separated from what we do want. There's all kinds of suffering. The suffering of hunger and thirst, so forth. So compassion, it's a mind that observes a sentient being and the suffering of that sentient being. And then it wishes for them to be free from that suffering, right? So that's the most important part, is it wishes for that sentient being to be free from suffering, right? So again, it can be with regard to ourselves or with regard to another person. So essentially that's compassion is, right? So it's helpful to distinguish between compassion and empathy, because people often mix those up, and it's important to distinguish, right? So empathy is similar in two parts, right? Empathy is also a mind. It also observes a sentient being who has suffering. But the similarity ends there, right? Empathy does not go to the next step of wishing for that person to be free from suffering. Then it becomes compassion, right? So what's the distinction? Compassion is the active wishing for, a person to be free from suffering. And empathy is just, observing another, a person suffering. So usually when we have empathy, it's empathy for another person, right? Not empathy for ourselves. We don't usually talk about that. So when we have empathy for another person, it means we see their suffering and we feel a degree of what that must be like, right? We resonate with, we can recognize and empathize with, means we can imagine what it might be like, we resonate with that person's suffering. So we feel some degree of what it might be like. And so empathy is a precursor to compassion. If we want to have compassion for another person, we first need to have empathy, right? But if we have empathy for other people's suffering again and again, so you see this a lot in the mental health profession, and there've been some very interesting studies, very good studies done of mental health. Not mental health, healthcare, the healthcare field, healthcare field, like hospitals, nurses and doctors and so on, and caretakers. So oftentimes they have empathy. Hopefully they usually have empathy for their clients, their patients. But if you have empathy again and again and again for other people that are experiencing severe suffering, you're resonating again and again, and you're feeling again and again a degree of that person's pain, those other people's pain and suffering, and it leads to burnout. This is a big cause of burnout in the healthcare field. Whereas if you transform the empathy into compassion, so not only you recognize and you resonate with, you sympathize with other people's suffering, but on the basis of that, you generate a wish to do something about it, right? To do whatever I can to relieve them of suffering. That protects from burnout, right? So there's studies done. This is studies done that show very clearly. People do like a 2 weeks training or several weeks training in compassion. It reduces their level of burnout compared to people who don't, right, in the healthcare field. So then so then practical ways to practice and cultivate compassion. A practical example. Yeah. Basically, in meditation, so we begin in meditation, like when we, our sitting meditation in our room or whatever, is practice for how we want to think and respond to situations in our daily life, in the real world, right? So first of all, we sit quietly in our own room, And we think, I mean, usually you visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings. So it's good to visualize, usually visualize like our mother of this life, maybe on our left, and then all our female family and friends to our left and behind us. Our father of this life immediately to our right, all our male friends and family to our right and behind us. And then the people who were most prone to become annoyed, irritated with, who antagonize us, imagine them seated directly in front, facing towards us. And then imagine all other sentient beings seated around. Right? So imagine, in short, we imagine ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings, divided into groups of friends, enemies, or antagonists, and strangers. And then we go one by one. So begin with someone that's close to you, like your mother or father, or sibling or friend. Think of that person. So you can maybe, while you're thinking of them, you can imagine placing them in front. Think of the person and think of the different problems they have, the different sufferings they experience. You know, whether they have financial problems, whether they're worried about, you know, their children's welfare, whether they're, you know, they have some sickness, or whether they're just, you know, they're chronically angry or depressed or whatever. Take one person, focus on that person, and think of the problems they have, you know, just in a neutral way, right? Without feeling like I have to react in some certain way. Just think in a neutral way about the problems that person experiences. Actually, it's good to start with yourself. Actually, it's good to start with yourself first, because if you don't really have a sense of what it means to have compassion for yourself, then it's very difficult to actually have sincere compassion for others, right? So, but yeah. So you could say, think of your own suffering first. And then as you think of different suffering you have or different sufferings that another person has, just generate the wish. May they be free from this suffering and the causes of the suffering. You know, as you think of problems you yourself have, just think, just generate, I mean, try to generate this sincere intention. May I be free from, you know, this form of suffering, this problem, this pain, this discontent, and the causes of it. So you don't have to know how or when, you know, how to be free from it, or when to be free from it, or what to do to be free from it. That's all next steps, right? First step is just generating this intention, you know, may I be free from suffering. May others be free from suffering, right? So you do to yourself, then with regard to, you know, some friends, then with regard to some strangers, then with regard to your, you know, antagonists, more difficult, and then with regard to all sentient beings. So you do that again and again and again. And then during, you know, so that's during your meditation session. And then during the day, during your ordinary life, you try to, you know, be more aware of what sufferings people experience around you, you know. And as you become aware of those, practice generating the intention, may they be free from that form of suffering. Okay, so that's a lot on that question. All right, now Theo's question. How are good and bad distinguished if they are ultimately empty, dependent concepts? For example, if I accept that my idea of good is bad for another, how do we override this subjectivity and establish an ethics? Okay, I think, Theo, are you a philosophy student? Perhaps, a little bit, yeah, good. Well, yeah. So the basis for in Buddhism, the basis for ethics, you should have a look. There's a good book, one of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's early books, maybe the first book he himself, you know, initiated, kind of composed, you could say. There's a ghostwriter, but it's called Ethics for a New Millennium, right? Ethics for a New Millennium. It's an excellent book. I mean, if you want to follow the Dalai, I mean, consider yourself a follower of the Dalai Lama, it's really important to read, you know, several main books that the Dalai Lama, from his own side, he produced. You know, there's many books, recordings of his teachings and books about the Dalai Lama, but there's a few books from his own side he produced. The first one is this one, Ethics for a New Millennium, Ancient Wisdom in a Modern World, or something like that. The second one is, I think, Beyond Religion. Beyond Religion is another one. Another one is Universe in a Single Atom. Those are the three main ones, I think. Anyway, so so Dalai Lama explains this again and again. He says basically like this: in the world, there's people who follow religion and people who don't, right? So people who follow religion, among religions, there's people who follow like religions that assert the existence of a creator God. Among those religions, usually, the creator God gave a set of, like the 10 Commandments or something, like a set of rules to follow that entail ethics. Among those who don't accept the creator God, like Buddhism and Jains, then they accept everything happens due to the law of cause and effect. But I don't know, maybe I'm digressing too much. So just to answer Theo's question, what's the best basis for ethics in the absence of inherently existing good and bad? Right? So basically, there's the fundamental assertion that all sentient beings fundamentally want satisfaction. They want well-being. They want happiness. And of course, happiness is a difficult term, right? Because it means different things for different people. But on some level, everybody wants well-being and what they consider to be well-being, what they consider to be happiness, right? And they don't want to be harmed, right? They don't want misery. They don't want displeasure and pain, right? Suffering. So that's the basis, right? So things which contribute to bringing about the well-being or the flourishing of things are considered good. And things which cause destruction, they harm the flourishing of things. They cause misery and pain to sentient beings. So here we're primarily talking about sentient beings, beings which have mental experience. So actions which primarily cause pain and suffering and misery to one sentient being or many sentient beings are considered bad. Things which primarily bring about well-being to sentient beings are considered good. So take a good example, that fits your kind of debate. What about cutting someone with a knife? Is that good or bad? Well, there's different cases of cutting, not a good example. Come on. It's bad. Okay, you're saying it's bad, I think. There's different cases of cutting someone with a knife, no? When a mugger, goes to steal someone's wallet and the person says, no, I'm not going to give you my wallet, and then he stabs them, cuts them with a knife, it causes them a lot of pain and misery. So of course that's bad, right? But when a surgeon goes to remove someone's appendix because it's infected with appendicitis, he cuts the person with a knife, but it contributes to their well-being. Thereby, it's good, right? So, just to add another layer, a level of, kind of complexity and kind of, I don't know, it's interesting. So in Tibetan Buddhism, one of the best things about Tibetan Buddhism is this whole genre of texts and practices called mind training texts, like mind training. So in the mind training text, basically what the technique is to learn to think about any situation such that it becomes good. We interpret it as good, right? So in the case with the mugger, like I gave, so in the mind training, according to mind training teachings, you would try to interpret any instance of being cut with a knife as good, right? So if someone's mugging us and we don't give them their wallet and they stab us with the knife, and we experience pain, of course, but can we interpret that? Can we interpret that as good? Yes, because we can interpret that. For example, my being stabbed by that person is a result of karma I created in the past. In the past, I stabbed someone else with a knife. Otherwise, I would never be stabbed with a knife in this life. So that's a result of my karma. So now that negative karma I created in the past, it is ripened. It has produced its result, and it will not produce another result in the future. Thereby, I purified that karma. And we can think that, that person, that mugger stabbing me with a knife, it's something that could well cause me to become angry and resentful. But I can use that situation in order to practice patience, the kind of forbearance of not becoming angry, and in order to practice compassion for that mugger, that person who stabbed me, instead of getting angry. So I can use that situation to overcome my own instinct to become angry, right? In the dependence upon that situation, I can first of all just be patient, be tolerant, and second of all, I can think, well, why did that person stab me? One, it's because I created the karma to be stabbed. Two, probably because they're really desperate. They're desperate for money. Otherwise, why would they do something like that? One, they're desperate for money, or for whatever reason. And two, because their mind is controlled by the distorted thoughts that it's okay to harm other sentient beings, right? Their mind is overcome by craving, probably craving. Like imagine it's a drug addict, for some whatever reason you think, some drug addict is trying to mug you. That their mind is overcome by craving for drugs, and they don't have any money to buy. Therefore, they're trying to mug me, right? So thinking that way, you can use that opportunity to generate compassion for the person. Then it becomes very beneficial for you, right? So in that way, you can interpret even being cut with a knife in that way as something very good and experience happiness as a result, right? So we want to, it's true, but that's why if being stabbed by a mugger was inherently bad, if it was inherently bad, we would not be able to interpret it in that way. There would be no space for reinterpretation. It's because it doesn't inherently exist as something bad that we're able to interpret it as something good and really experience it as something good, right? But the problem is, it's because good things also are not inherently good that we can interpret them as being bad and we experience them as being bad. That's the problem with pessimism. If you're a pessimist, you interpret everything in a negative way and you make yourself unhappy. Right? So mind training is trying to be a radical optimist, basically. Okay. Then Bain has a question. Good morning. Yeah, good morning. It's nighttime here. Okay. Good morning to you, Bain. Could you please go over one more time the first two verses of the first absurdity? Basically, is intrinsic characteristics of things equivalent to inherently existent characteristics of things? Yes, intrinsic characteristics of things is equivalent to inherently existing characteristics of things. Basically, if things have intrinsic characteristics, it means they inherently exist. Those are synonyms. And if such, how can it arise dependently? That's the problem. It cannot. Those are opposite. Like it is contradictory. It is contradictory. Exactly. It is contradictory. And then what is meant by denying it in the second line, right? So what it's saying is, yeah. So what it's saying is, those are contradictory, inherently existent and dependently arising. There, I have to fit my two fists in the screen. Those are contradictory, right? If it's one, it's not the other. If it's the other, it's not the one, right? So, but the problem is, if someone asserts that, like many people do, below the consequentialist school, like I don't know, you in Droma's course? Venerable Droma's course? Yeah. So all the other schools, the autonomous middle way school down, they all say, basically, things are dependently arising, but they also have to inherently exist, right? So the other schools, they all say things are both. So Chandrakirti is saying the problem with that is Arya beings, when they analyze to see if things inherently exist, they very clearly find that they do not. Things do not inherently exist. So if you insist on saying that things are inherently existent, what it means is those Arya beings not only negate the inherent existence of things, they negate the very existence of things, right? That Arya beings negate the existence of things whatsoever, right? So you fall into nihilism, right? See, but His Holiness didn't say, but I always find from my side, I find the problem with this reasoning, it seems a little circular to me, right? You're kind of assuming the Arya beings that they realize what's true, which of course they do, but well, anyway, maybe, if things inherently existed, then the Arya beings wouldn't find that things don't inherently exist, right? That's the problem. They're kind of tied together. Anyway, but the main thing is to keep in mind is, yes, those two are opposite. Inherent existence is the opposite of dependently arising. If you take that away, that's plenty. Okay. Madhavji, welcome back from Fort
Hi,
Lauderdale.
good morning.
Good
Yes,
morning.
that's absolutely. Good morning. Good morning. I had a quick question for you regarding a mantra, actually. It's a little off subject, but I would like to know what the meaning of Teata Om Dare Dare Bendare is. That's the
Tayata
start
Om
of the
Tade Tade
Teata
Tade
Om Dare Bendare Soha. That's
Ale Dade Dade Bendade Soha. I don't know
yeah,
actually. I mean, okay, the parts of it I can explain.
okay.
Tayata Om Dade Dade Bendade Soha. Okay, I'll explain the parts I know and the parts I don't know. I can't explain. So
All right.
Tayata means the thus gone one, right? Means the one, so the thus gone one. So what that means is the one who's I mean, it means different things, right? On one hand, it means the one who has gone beyond samsara, right? So how do we go beyond samsara? By realizing that nothing inherently exists, right? So another phrase for, I mean, which means realizing emptiness, the emptiness of all, all things, emptiness of inherent existence. So that emptiness, what's the Sanskrit for emptiness, Madhavji?
I'm not sure. You tell me.
You don't know? Come on, you look like
No,
a
not on top
Sanskrit
of my head this morning.
yogin there. What's the word for zero in Hindi?
Oh, I know. Yeah. There's no such a thing.
What is it? Shunya,
There's no
sunya, shunya.
sunya.
Come on, shunya. Every time I go to an Indian railway station, I hear on the overcom, da, 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 shunya, da, 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 da. When they announce the name of the number, the train numbers. If the train number has zero in it, you hear shunya.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Or sun or sunya, I'm not sure. Anyway, sunyata means emptiness. Sunyata.
Yeah, sunyata,
So,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, sunyata is emptiness. Sunya, I think sun or sunya. What is it? Dilshad? Sun or sunya? Dilshad knows. Shun. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So shunyata means emptiness. That means it's also translated as thusness in English, right? So the thus gone one means the one who has abides in a continual realization of emptiness, basically. So Tathagata can mean the one who's gone beyond samsara, or the one who has gone beyond all obscurations, or the one who has gone beyond ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, and continually abides in a realization of emptiness. Okay, so that's Tayata. And then Om. Om is composed of 3 letters. O, A, Hum. Combined.
Hum.
Ah, Humam.
Yeah.
What?
Yes. A-U-M. Om, yeah.
A-U-M, Ahuma. So those 3 letters, they represent, in Buddhism, right? I know in Hinduism, there'll be a different explanation, right? But in Buddhism, they represent the Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind, right? So Om is like, it's said that syllable, it draws forth the blessings of all the Buddha's body, holy body, speech, and mind. Hayata Om. So in many Buddhist mantras, you'll find Om at the beginning. Almost most Buddhist mantras, they contain the syllables Om, Ah, Hum. Usually Om and Ah are at the beginning, Hum is at the end. But the one you're asking about, it just contains Om. It doesn't have Ah, Hum. So Om, Dari Dari Bendare is Soha, right?
Yeah.
The Dari Dari Bendare, I don't know what it means.
Okay.
Soha at the end means may it be thus. May it come to be.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because because I recite the Golden Light Sutra, and in the beginning of the sutra, it says to recite it 7 times, and do it 1 million times. You should recite it, because I do the confession on chapter 4 each day. So I just wanted to know what the mantra was.
Yeah, that would be Lama Zopa Rinpoche's instructions. Lama Zopa Rinpoche usually adds instructions like that to practices. Probably if you do a search online, search like, Lama Zopa Rinpoche and type in the mantra, you'll probably find some
Okay.
explanation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, sure. Okay. Let's see. Sunita has a question. There are times when you feel extremely drained and you feel helpless. What do you do in such a situation? Okay. Yeah, when you feel drained and helpless, you feel extremely drained and helpless. What do you do in such a situation? Yeah, good question. Yeah, there's many different things you can do. So it kind of depends on, yeah, there's many different things to do. It kind of depends on, what sort of level of practice you're at. But yeah, and it depends how you're drained and feeling helpless. So usually, if it's, of course, you're probably not asking about if you're physically exhausted, right? That's probably not what you mean. If you're physically exhausted, yeah, you just need to rest and eat good food and stuff. And it's quite easy, right? You're probably thinking about, when you're mentally exhausted, right? So one thing to do, first of all, is just initially try to practice quieting your mind. We become mentally exhausted because we have disturbing thoughts just habitually arising, like worry, especially worry. No? Okay. No. Well, do you want to just fill in the details? I can't help it. I can unmute you.
So good evening. It's the when you feel a disconnect between the body and your consciousness. Like you feel and you know that you just want to burst, kind of.
Okay.
There's something that just you feel like you can't hold it anymore. It's not this body. It's something beyond. And
Right.
yeah, and you have that kind of an urgency again and again and again and again. So it's nothing with what's happening around you. It's nothing with you losing control of things around you. No.
Yeah.
No.
But why, the sense of wanting to burst in what way? You can feel like you want to burst with joy, but
I just want to be free. Like I feel like it's time to just release. But then you know that you still feel you can't. You don't have that freedom yet,
Yeah.
So what do you do in such a situation?
I see. Well, the simple answer is you have to practice patience, right? But that's easier said than done, of course, right? Well, one important thing to remember is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's advice, always to practice compassion in every situation, right? So how do we practice compassion in this kind of situation? Compassion for yourself, So just, first of all, just to recognize that, yeah, I feel this unbearable kind of yearning to be free or yearning for things to be different, and I can't, or I want to, like you're saying, I feel this unbearable yearning to be completely free from things, and yet I can't. So first of all, just to, instead of not liking that, feeling that way, not just wanting to not feel that way, it's like you just make it worse, right? So first of all, just do kind of with a neutral mind, try to sit and generate a neutral mind and look at how you feel, right? And accept that, okay, try to generate acceptance that, okay, this is the way I feel, and try to generate, compassion for yourself, to see how, okay, this is disturbing my mind, it's disturbing my peace of mind, and I wish it wasn't, right? May I be, and so really with a kind of, not only I wish it wasn't, like I don't want it to be that way, but may I be well, you know, instead of being disturbed, may I be at peace, you know, may I be at ease, may I have satisfaction, because that is possible. We also have to recognize that it is possible to be at peace, to be happy. We can remember things, you know, times in the past in our life when we were at peace and we were happy. Thereby, we know that in the future, the same is possible, right? So one is just to generate compassion for yourself, to practice that. And then another thing that can help is to imagine, because sometimes part of the problem is that we feel like I'm the only one that feels this way. Other people don't, right? We feel like this is really terrible. Nobody else has this problem. I have this problem. So we become kind of self-centered, right? And that makes it seem like much worse than it actually is. So it can be helpful to think about how, you know, there's 7 billion people on this planet. Among those, many others probably feel the very same way I do, right? And then generate compassion for them as well. And so first generate compassion for yourself, and then think about how others, I'm not alone in having this kind of feeling, this kind of problem. Other people also have this kind of problem. They have in the past, they do now, they will in the future. And then try to think, by my experiencing this difficulty, this, you know, exhaustion, this helpless feeling, may others be free from that. You know, I don't have to know how, but by my experiencing this helplessness, it gives me an opportunity to learn how I can undo that, how I can deal with it, how I can cope with it, how I can overcome this feeling of helplessness. And thereby I can benefit others. I can help others overcome their helplessness, right? So in fact, this is an incredible opportunity. You know, every hardship we have is an opportunity to learn and to gain skills and tools and empathy to be able to help others, right? So that's a very good way to think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There's no more questions in the chat. So, and none of you have your virtual hand up. So, and we only have 10 minutes left. So why don't we do some meditation? We'll do a little bit more meditation today than yesterday. So if you need to stand up and stretch your legs or have a drink of water or something, kind of relax for a little bit, 30 seconds, a minute. I'm gonna have some water. Okay, the sun has risen in Bain's world. That's good. The sun is set in Dilshad's world. Antonin is still somewhere in interstellar space. Okay, so like this, so we have a few minutes to meditate. Yeah. So I'd like to meditate on bodhicitta a little bit. And as a basis for meditation, we'll use these few verses by Shantideva, which His Holiness mentioned today. His Holiness mentioned almost every day of this teaching, I think. I'll share my screen so you can see those verses. And sorry, I want to close the chat first. Here. Basically, I'll just ask you to read the verse or verses. You know, you can use one verse or two or three or, you know, just a couple lines, and then just reflect on the meaning in your own way, right? I think that's enough. I don't, maybe don't need to give any more guidance than that. Okay, so here are the verses by Shantideva. Yeah, so just the first verse, I mean, alone is very, there's a lot to think about, right? So whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from others to be happy. All comes from desiring others to be happy. Whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. So that's talking about the benefits of cherishing others, right? The benefits of having empathy and compassion for others, the benefits of generating loving kindness for others, the benefits of caring about others, in short. So basically what it's saying is, you know, every joy we experience, we experience that because we've created positive karma, right? Every positive karma we've created is because we have concern for others. We're concerned about not harming others, or we're concerned about helping others in some way. Thereby, every joy we experience in this world all comes from desiring others to be happy. And then the second two lines talk about the faults of selfishness. And whatever suffering there is in this world all comes from desiring myself to be happy. Now that we have to interpret a little bit, right? Because there's no problem with desiring ourselves to be happy, but what it means is every suffering we experience all comes from desiring ourselves to be happy alone at the exclusion of others' happiness, right? So if we're totally self-centered, we don't care about others whatsoever, all we care about is our own, you know, happiness alone. All we care about is what we want, what we don't want, and it doesn't, others don't matter. So every suffering we have comes from that kind of selfish, self-centered attitude. Right? So that's all. I won't explain anymore. I'll try to think about that verse or one of the other verses for 5 minutes. Okay, we should stop there. I wish we had more time to meditate, but you can, yeah, I hope you'll continue on your own in the future. Yeah, but this is a very good way to meditate. Just take a verse, you know, from like, you know, Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life or some other text that resonates with you, put it in front of you, read it, think about it, meditate on it. That's what I mean. In part of this teachings, His Holiness has been talking a lot about how that's what he does. A lot of these verses he's quoted that I've put in the documents on the Google Drive, they're verses that His Holiness is saying, this is what I meditate on, you know, every day, you know, and it's benefited me a lot. You should do likewise if you want to deepen your understanding of emptiness. If you want to reduce anger and attachment, you know, greed, jealousy, arrogant pride, and if you want to increase your compassion and kindness, then read these verses, memorize these verses, contemplate these verses, meditate on them again and again. So in that vein, I'm going to point out just a couple other documents I uploaded to the Google Drive today, which you can download. Where? Oh, no, okay, hold on. I didn't open them in my computer yet. 1 second. To show you, I have to open them first. One second. Nope. Yeah, here's the one. Okay. So the first is this one. So this is a short text on emptiness that His Holiness the Dalai Lama composed a long time ago, probably, I don't know, 40 years ago in Tibetan. I'll just scroll through. So it's called A Key to the Madhyamaka by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. It's just about, well, you can see there's 33 pages long, so it's quite short, and it gives an explanation of his teachings on emptiness. So it's excellent if you can read that, and you can use that as a basis for meditation on emptiness. And then this document is a collection of verses that actually the main basis is about 6-7 years ago. His Holiness actually had printed out a bunch of verses some by Chandrakirti, by Nagarjuna, and some by Chandrakirti. There's about 10 verses total, or not even. There's just like, I don't know, 7. His Holiness actually had these printed out on, you know, A4 pieces of paper and distributed them to the audience, and asked all in the audience to meditate on them, use them as basis for meditation. So that's very uncommon. I mean, for any Tibetan Lama to print out, you know, verses and distribute it to the audience. It's like never done. So it really shows that His Holiness really wants his, you know, people who want to follow his teachings to use these verses, right? So I put them together here and then, you know, uploaded them to the Google Drive. So since that time, I started, you know, reciting them and meditating on them. I mean, to some degree every day, and I found very, very helpful. Very beneficial. So I think you will too. So I try to advertise those. And then the other advertisement is the Venerable Droma's course for those of you here or I don't know, on Facebook or YouTube, I think, in the virtual world. So who have not joined Venerable Droma's course, then you're welcome to join. I think it's a 1-month course on emptiness. We're about halfway through now. But all the sessions are being recorded, so you can either join as a live participant and participate in the Zoom room, or you can also join, you know, you can also join just to receive the recordings, to have access to all the recordings of those teachings. So if you'd like to get a very nice, extensive presentation on emptiness, how to meditate on emptiness, and all the issues around emptiness by a very learned, experienced Western teacher, monastic, Venerable Droma, then who's also a psychologist, I think. Yeah, you're invited to join that course. Yeah, and then so His Holiness will teach next month. It looks like His Holiness is going to teach for about 3 days every month. He did in August, September, now October. In November, I think the teachings are scheduled like November 5 through 7. There's a teaching on a beautiful text by Nagarjuna called Janchup Sendra. I think it's called like Explanation of Bodhicitta or something. But it's a short praise. It's like a beautiful song, kind of like a prayer by Nagarjuna about conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So ultimate bodhicitta is the mind directly realizing emptiness. So it'll be mostly about emptiness again. Yeah, so we'll have these review sessions that time as well, if I'm still alive or they don't find someone else. Yeah. So anyway, thank you all. Let's dedicate. So think of all the merit, just briefly. Think of all the merit we've created through these sessions, and all the merit created by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. There's many lives, and in this life, and especially during this teaching event and giving teachings, all the merit created by the organizers. Rejoice. All the merit created by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and every sentient, all sentient beings everywhere, who, compelled with a positive motivation, use their lives to benefit others in ways great and small. So think how excellent that is. So imagine all this positive energy gathered together. First of all, bring to mind any intentions you would like us to pray for. So any for yourself or family or friend who might be sick or having some problem, or any intention, bring to mind. So may all of your noble intentions be fulfilled exactly as you wish. So in addition, may the Buddha's teachings spread far and wide and remain in this world for a long time, bringing benefits to sentient beings, and especially in accordance with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's wish that the essential teachings of the Buddha on how to reduce afflictive emotions and increase positive emotions like loving kindness and compassion, that they be spread in a non-religious way, like in a secular way, so that all people in every walk of life, regardless of their religious affiliation or none, that they can have access to and use those teachings. And so may all sentient beings become more kind-hearted. And may these ideals of universal compassion spread in our human society everywhere in the world. May all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering and have every form of happiness and well-being up to full enlightenment. May all of our actions only contribute towards the well-being of ourselves and others and never cause even the slightest harm. And may every sentient being find spiritual guidance which is most suited to their own disposition and needs. And especially may the host of these review sessions, Tushita Meditation Center, may continue to flourish and offer Dharma programs like this to to countless people far into the future. And for that purpose, may it receive all the supportive conditions it needs, sponsorship and volunteers, and so forth and so on. So thank you to Pamela, director, and thank you to Felipe for helping, and Antonin and Kunpen and the whole team at Tushita. Thank you to all of you, audience participants, without who no programs would happen. Thank you for joining. You get very good attention, ask very good questions. Look like you're really, I know this is a difficult topic. It's not easy to follow, and especially, participating in programs all day long. It's not easy. So thank you for, enduring and making sincere effort to, give consideration to these things.
Thank you so much, Venerable Legtsok. I would like to, on behalf of all the students and Tushita Meditation Center, offer you this kata and our sincere appreciation for leading these review sessions and helping us understand a little bit better the meaning of emptiness and what His Holiness has taught. And we really, really hope and request that you can again and again give us more teachings and help us out in our path. And I'm going to unmute everyone so they can also show their appreciation and thank you for all your kind work.
Sure, I'm happy. I also learned a lot, so I'm very happy to do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Chitra.
Pleasure.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you all so
Bye.
much for being here, for being present, and I'll see you all in the course.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Venerable.
Bye. Bye.